Well, let's tackle one more topic. And so I'll start this off. There are rumors that there's a new iMac
Hmm.
and possibly new MacBook Pros coming at the end of this month, like literally on the 30th or 31st. That's what Mark
Right.
Gurman at Bloomberg reported, that they will have an event on one of those days and introduce those. Now, there's the background on that part. The other
Hmm.
background on this is I've mentioned this. I tried, I don't know how I would have been able to work over the weekend and over this trip well without having power close by,
Right.
because my battery seems to be getting worse. And I mean, some of it's the amount of stuff that I do with it, but like I had done a little bit of work Thursday before we left. And then Friday morning, I had a meeting. So I had to use Teams. Of course, they use Teams, not my favorite. But,
Hmm.
um, but by the end of that hour and 45 minutes Teams meeting, I had to plug in because it was warning me that it was going to shut down a computer.
Right.
And so, a little bit of work Thursday, I hadn't plugged it in, just sitting in the backpack. And then that hour and 45-minute meeting, and my battery is gone. So I'm gonna have to have another option for portable computing, right?
Hmm.
And I really, really want to go iPad, but there's some question, and I told Jason he needed to listen to one of the podcasts I listened to, the segment on doing everything on an iPad versus
Right.
having a Mac as well. So there's some concern about how easy or how much jumping through hoops I'd have to do to like record this podcast. So I really want to go iPad. If I go iPad, it's easy. It's the 12.9-inch Pro, or if they come out with a bigger one, it would be whatever the bigger version of the iPad
Right.
Pro is. So that's pretty
Same here.
straightforward. But we talked, what, three or so episodes ago, and we actually struggled to talk about the iPad lineup because it's a mess,
It
right?
is.
This one has this feature and this one has this feature. And that's actually come up on a couple of podcasts. So the iPad lineup is kind of messy. But when I started last night thinking about these rumors about the new Macs, specifically MacBooks, because I'd have to have something that was portable, you've
Hmm.
got the 13-inch MacBook Air, you've got the 15-inch MacBook Air,
Hmm.
then you've got the 13-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar, and then you've got the 14-inch MacBook Pro and the 15-inch or the 16-inch MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
And so you've got all of these devices, and I lay it out like that, and you think, oh well, that's super easy. The Airs are the consumer devices, and then the MacBook Pros are the professional devices, and you just decide what size of screen you want. Well, I'm looking at this, and it's not that easy. So the
It's not.
MacBook Air and that 13-inch MacBook Pro, it says they have the same number of Thunderbolt ports. But what you have to remember is that one of those Thunderbolt ports on the 13-inch MacBook Pro, you have to use to power the device. And on the
Yep.
MacBook Air, you have MagSafe. You can power through USB-C and through that Thunderbolt port, but you have the MagSafe to power the MacBook Air. And the
Hmm.
MacBook Air's got a 1020 or a 1080p webcam, and the 13-inch MacBook Pro's got a 720. And so I was last night, I just kind of threw some in there, and Apple's got really good on their website, right, where you can compare different devices, and just
Hmm.
started getting the pricing for where I would want them, because I want a terabyte hard drive just because of all the video and stuff that we're doing. And I want enough memory that I don't have to worry about this thing. And those two, the 13-inch M2 uh, MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, when I finally got them configured and added Apple Care, they were
Hmm.
only a couple $100 apart. That the Pro one was a little more expensive.
Right.
But yet everything in the MacBook Air is newer technology, but it's the Pro device. And I know I'm one of only four people that might say this, but I like the touch bar.
Yeah.
Nobody else likes the touch bar. I only use it for like four things.
Screen brightness.
I use it for screen
Is that
brightness,
right?
volume
That's the
and
only thing I
mute,
use it for. Yeah.
and to take screenshots.
Okay. I hadn't done that.
Yeah. So I don't use it for a lot of stuff, but I like it. And so I think it feels like the MacBook lineup can be just as confusing as the iPad lineup. And now
Yep.
I was listening to Upgrade and they were talking about this, and they said most people should just use the MacBook Air. That's what
Right.
most people
I think
need.
so.
And so I'm thinking, okay, it's got all the newer technology, and I could get the memory and the hard drive, and then, but it's still going to be a $2,000 machine.
Hmm.
But then I start thinking about pure power because one of the things that I do is a lot of video rendering,
Right.
right? And so, am I going to be able to get? I mean, they'll both go up to 24 gigabytes of RAM, but if I go to the MacBook Pro 14-inch, I can get up to 96 gigabytes
Yeah.
of RAM. And so it's just their whole lineup seems to be confusing, right? Now, if we get this
Hmm.
event and at the end of October, we might get some clarity on this. And so far this year, no iPads have changed. None.
Right.
The only iPad change is that Apple Pencil we talked
Right.
about just a minute ago. So if no iPads change this year, maybe next year they're all going to launch at the same time and it's going to
Right.
clarify the
It'll be a
iPad
huge
line.
focus. Hmm.
So here's my question for you, Jason. If I have to buy a computer in the next 3 to 6 months, and this is the state of things for the next 3 to 6 months,
Hmm.
what do I do?
So yeah, I'm with you. It was simpler when it was just a MacBook Air, and a MacBook Pro, right? Basically, small, medium, and large. No, not necessarily talking about the size, but you get the features that you want. Small features on the MacBook, the entry level. The MacBook Air was always thinner, lighter. It had some of the Pro features, but in a smaller form factor, right? More portable. The body was always thinner, was always lighter, which is the name Air, right? This is what they got the name Air from. And then the Pro was for you know prosumers and professionals and things like that. It had all of the latest features, all of the latest technology, all of the bells and whistles. So it made it clear what you wanted. If you were just getting it for school or just needed to shoot out a few emails or whatever, you went with the MacBook, the entry level. If you wanted to be more portable but needed a little more power, you went with the Air. And of course, if you were a professional, you went with the Pro. So I think there's no question from my standpoint that you're a prosumer professional now, right? You're not going to make it with the entry level MacBook. That's out of the question. The MacBook Air, the 15-inch that came out this year that we loved when they announced it, we said it was awesome. 90% of people can go with that and love it. I don't think that's the one for you, right? So if there are new pros, new chips, faster processor, faster Wi-Fi, things like that, then there's no question you're going to have to go with that, right? Two podcasts, maybe more. Your company that you're running, your personal life, you're going to need a little more power than what that Air can give you. So I think it's no question you're going to have to go with the new Pro. I think even if you say, okay, I want to wait for the iPad next year, you're still waiting for next year, one, which means you're going to be stuck on that bad battery that you have now if you don't get it fixed, which I doubt you have any interest on getting that battery replaced. You're going to be waiting till new iPads. And then what if that's not the iPad that you want? What if it's just not enough? What if it doesn't have the new features we want? So we'll know at the end of the month, whatever MacBook Pro that comes out, we know it's going to be awesome, right?
Yeah.
So I think it just moved up your timeline. I think, without a doubt, you're going to have to go with this new Pro.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'd love to see if anybody that's listening has some thoughts about this. I mean, more power is always good, in my opinion,
Right,
right? And the more you and I get into video, and one of my
right,
concerns is I think one of us probably has to have a Mac to
right.
do the podcast the way we want it, right? I mean, I got thinking about I could do the Zoom on my phone like you are, right?
Hmm.
And it would still record to the cloud just like it is. So we would get those segments and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we could probably use Ferrite on the iPad. But I just don't know. I mean, ideally, what I want is for this Mac to last long enough for that iPad to come out. Because
Hmm.
I'm with you. And the more I've been reading and listening to people talk about the M2 chip, it's so much more power hungry than the M1. That's why you're having problems with battery life
Yeah.
on your iPad Pro, which doesn't solve my current predicament.
Yeah.
So ideally, I'd like this Mac to last long enough. I'd like to be able to do 98% of my job on the new iPad Pro when it comes out, including recording this podcast.
Yeah.
Because if I could do that, then this machine is only when I really need to do something massive, right? And
Hmm.
then usually it's going to be plugged into power. I mean, let's be honest there. If I'm doing that kind of stuff, it's
Yeah.
going to be plugged into power, but it never leaves my desk, essentially. And I thought about, I could go get a Mac Mini and then I could get an app and I could remote into the Mac Mini. But then if I want to do that when I'm at a campground, that means that I have to punch a hole in my home network. And I just don't want things to be that
Right.
complicated, right? I mean, that is right now, Mac OS is not complicated as a whole, but maintaining my comfort level with security and not having malware and all of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff on the Mac, it's just more work than an iPad, right? And
Yeah.
I want and maybe there's some hardware that I have to buy now that we can put more things in the USB-C port on iPads, right? Maybe there's a audio controller that I need to put in like some of the podcasters do versus just connecting straight into the computer and letting GarageBand do all the work, right? I mean, there's
Hmm.
some of that kind of stuff that I need to look into. I honestly don't want a Mac. And
Right.
so that also factors into this decision when I start looking at paying $2,000 for a Mac that I don't want,
Hmm.
and then another $2,000 for the iPad that I do want, just because I got to buy the Mac, just because there's that 5% of stuff that
Right.
either I can't do on the iPad or becomes so convoluted on the iPad that it's hard to do. And I'm not like a Federico Viticci, right? That can afford to go take 6 months and just experiment with things.
Right.
I don't have the patience to do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's his whole business, right? MacStories.net, that's his thing. It's all about that kind of stuff. But I have this whole other consulting business that I
Right.
can't interrupt. Now, that business, honestly, I could do all of it on an iPad, right? It's,
You think so?
yeah,
The
yeah. I
meetings
mean,
and everything.
yeah, I don't think that's a problem at all. I mean, most of my clients, we don't do video. Nobody wants to be on video for hours at a time, right?
Right. Right.
And so it's mostly in spreadsheets and apps that are already in Safari on the Mac, which will work just fine in Safari on the iPad Pro, right? Like I said, I
Hmm.
upgraded to Sonoma because I don't have anything special on here. I'm using
Right.
Apple apps and Office's stuff, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft
Yeah.
Office. And so, yeah, I know I could do all of that stuff on there. Honestly, if that's all I was doing, I think it would be an easier decision, but it's this podcast, not even my Leaders Lift podcast, because that's just me, right? And I could just turn
Right.
my iPhone on and record and plug this microphone straight into the phone
Right.
and call it good, right? But I just don't know, especially the more we get into video, if I'm going to
Right.
do that. And then, when I look at the MacBooks, you're like, you're probably going to need to go with the new one. Well, odds are the new one that's heftier and beefier because the current MacBook Pro 13-inch that has the touch bar,
Hmm.
it's not great, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not liquid retina display, it's just retina. So the MacBook Air is better than the
Right.
MacBook Pro 13-inch. But then I'm going to give up the touch bar. Okay, I'll have to figure out keyboard shortcuts to do those few things
Right.
that I want to do, right? But I didn't even go in and price the 14-inch because you're looking at the M2 Pro or the M2 Max chip. So, maybe
Hmm.
I should go in and do that. Let's see. So a MacBook Pro 14-inch with just the Pro chip. We'll just go with the Pro.
Hmm.
Because I don't need to go anywhere beyond that. I mean, you're starting at $2,000.
Yeah.
That's before I go in. That's
Wow.
only 16 gigs of memory and 512. So let me select that one.
Okay. Well, I don't know what. 13-inch. I thought it was starting more around the $1,500 mark,
Well,
but
that's the 13 old one. This is now it's 14 and 16. It's not 13 and 15 for the high ends anymore.
right,
All right,
right,
so there's the M2 Pro, 10 core CPU, so more powerful, blah blah blah. But that's all just fine and dandy. I don't need to upgrade
yeah,
that. 32 gigabytes of memory. I would want more
hmm
memory, and I want the
yeah.
terabyte of
You would need more
storage,
too.
so I don't have to worry about this.
Yeah,
I am now up to before Apple Care, I'm up to $2,600. So Apple Care is probably another
yeah,
$300. So I'm
yeah.
up to a $3,000 laptop.
That you don't want to use in the first place.
Yeah.
So I mean, I understand. I understand completely. But again, what if the iPad is not what we're expecting it to be? Right? Because rumors are just that. They're just rumors. We know it's going to be better than the M2 iPad, but is it going to have all of those features, right? We were talking about maybe it's going to have more features for podcasters and video creators and stuff like that to be able to add more external devices. Maybe it'll support more external devices and stuff like that, but we just don't know,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
And
that's
you'll
why
be
my
waiting months
that's why
when
my ideal scenario is that this laptop quits crapping out on me, right?
right.
And that it can wait until they announce. Because I also heard today that their Jason Snell on Upgrade said he wouldn't be surprised if the iPad Pros don't come in the spring, that they come later because they got to have the M3
This
chip,
summer. Right,
right? And so they're not going to announce the M3 chip and put it in the iPads before they put it in
right,
something else, right? And so I just don't know if I can wait that long
right.
on this and still maintain the whole reason that I'm independent to start with is flexibility, work whenever, wherever I want, which is
Right.
starting to get hampered by this. Ideally, if I could do everything but record this podcast, if the 2 hours that we take to record this podcast had to be done on a Mac,
Mhm.
right? But I could do all the editing and everything else on the iPad, that would be enough. And then maybe I would say, okay, I'm just going to get a Mac Mini. I'll figure out how to punch the hole in the network, VPN,
Right,
whatever the case may be, secure
right.
authentication in to just record this podcast. I just don't know. I don't know. So,
Yeah.
and Mac OS is great. I mean, all the functionalities there.
Mhm.
I could, in theory, do my job and never buy anything that was not Apple. I could get rid of my Microsoft subscription, all that kind of stuff. I just do it because that's
Right,
what I'm comfortable with. So Mac OS will allow me to do all of my job.
right.
No problem
Both
whatsoever.
jobs.
Yeah. I don't like to deal with it.
Yeah.
The sync issues, maybe if they stabilize stuff, I won't be as frustrated, but the sync issues, the fact that I have to log out of my iCloud account like once every 3 or 4 months, all of
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. And then I'm on an Intel, so when I go to the Apple Silicon, it'll be better from a battery life standpoint and a performance
Yeah.
standpoint. But I want to go back. I loved when I was at Stewart and all I had was a 12.9-inch iPad. It connected
Mhm.
to a monitor, and this was before it really worked connecting to monitors, right? And
Right,
I couldn't use a
right.
mouse, and I couldn't do dual displays, and no stage manager, and none of that kind of stuff. I loved it, and I just had this little icon that I clicked on when I needed to go into our Windows, right?
Right.
And it just connected into the Windows server that somebody had made. By the way, it was a server. It wasn't just a computer that I was
Yeah, it
connecting
wasn't
to,
a
right?
computer. Yeah.
It was a server, so I had no problems with performance connecting in there. But Jason also mentioned it'd be really nice if we could virtualize Mac OS on an iPad.
Yeah,
Sign me up, right?
yeah. Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
think
that would be a huge that way we can do the things that require the desktop level OS, but still keep our iPads,
yep.
just for the one job or the one or two tasks that you need to do on a Mac. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So, Jason, it didn't help. This conversation didn't help at all. So,
I thought it would, but we'll know when they make the announcement how great the new Mac is going to be. You may have to go with it. I
Yeah.
think.
I mean, I didn't think you were going to tell me that. I think you were going to say, no, 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 you'll be fine with the MacBook Air, or go with the, if you really want the touch bar, go with the 13-inch, which is kind of in this weird state right now. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Right.
And hopefully this Mac will hold out long enough for me to get an idea of what's coming. And the other thing is, if I get a Vision Pro, the ability to put your Mac, right, to
Right.
basically AirPlay your Mac to the Vision Pro is there too. So I don't see getting to where I can't have a Mac in my life as much
Hmm.
as I don't want to have one. I just got to figure out the best solution for it. And
Right.
I don't know how you do that right now with the lineups the way they are.
Yeah. And just going by rumors too. You
Yeah.
can't make any decision based on rumors because Apple, no matter what rumors, what parts leak, I said this before, nothing's set in stone until someone stands on that stage at the keynote and says, this is what's coming. And it'll be available on this date. If they don't do that, rumors are just that, just rumors. So it's hard to make long-term plans based on rumors. Now, some guys have a good track record. Gurman has a good track record when it comes
Yeah.
to rumors and stuff like that. But still, even he doesn't know until Tim Cook or someone on the team stands on the stage and says, "This is that."